Hey, good Sunday evening, everybody. Welcome into the Rocky Top Rewind. I am Eric Kane alongside Brett Hubbs. Every Sunday night here during football season, 8 to 9 o'clock Eastern Time. It is when you guys get to ask us questions. We take a look back at what happened over the weekend for Tennessee football, and we have a whole lot of fun here on the Volquest YouTube channel and, of course, at volquest.com. As always, a big thank you to our presenting sponsor for the Rocky Top Rewind. That is Spivey King and Spivey LLP. You got a problem, let them find a solution for you. TN Trial Lawyers. You get a free consultation by giving Spivey King and Spivey LLP a call today at 423-245-4185. That is 423-245-4185. And always at Spivey King and Spivey LLP.com. Brent Hubbs, Tennessee finishes the regular season with an 8-4 record, 4-4 in the SEC. It was a 48-24 win over Vanderbilt. Tennessee did exactly what it was supposed to do. Win big, look good doing it, and of course the star of the show was senior quarterback Joe Milton.
Yeah, and Joe was good, and upon rewatching, Joe was probably even better than I thought he was live, and I thought he was really good live. Really decisive, processing really fast. Eric making quick decisions, which is something I think that he's not always done this season. But I thought he was very decisive with his reads and where he was going. His fundamentals were good. You got off to a hot start. Vanderbilt clearly came out, and Clark Lee, confirmed or said this. So this is not me diving into football X's and O's and being a genius here, but they'd given up a half a mile basically against Tennessee on the ground the last two seasons, and they were not going to die that death. And so because of that early on, Tennessee got some stuff that they liked. That's why you saw them flip it out there on those two quick screens. And then you go back and look at that play on the touchdown to Ramel Keaton. There's basically 10 guys in the box, and they're all playing to one hash. So to Tennessee's side of the field, to the far hash, if you will, if you're looking at it from Tennessee's sideline to the far hash, it's one-on-one. It's Ramel Keaton in a corner with all of that space to work with. That is a huge favorable matchup for Tennessee. Those are the kinds of plays we saw from Tennessee a year ago. They got some of those looks and took advantage of it early and got Joe Milton in a real rhythm right out of the gate.
Yeah, he was really good. Again, that play you're talking about, that was right off the first series of the game. Play number 3, 56 yards to Ramel Keaton. Ramel Keaton had another 46-yard touchdown reception where you wrote about it, and I saw it on replay again, and he did a great job coming back to the football, continuing his route, getting vertical, hitting the sideline, then turned on the jets. And that's something that Tennessee struggled with at points and times this year, is that explosive play, down the field passing. And in the first half, you had a couple, of course, 56 to Ramel Keaton, 34 yards to Jacob Warren, 46 yards to Ramel Keaton in the second half. And that Jacob Warren play, which was not the best throw of the day for Joe Milton. We can talk about that here in a moment, but he got pressure off the edge. Gerald Mincey's playing on one leg essentially. He gets beat. Jabari Small tries to get between he and the defender, and it forces Milton to step up, keeping the eyes downfield and throwing to Jacob Warren, who was wide open on the play into the end zone. Milton just had a great feel for the game yesterday, and I get it can be frustrating because I wrote about it last night, saving your best for last in the regular season. It's kind of like, well, where's that been all year? But he was good. First Tennessee Vol to account for 6 total touchdowns since Jonathan Crompton in 2009. He was just good. He was clearly at his best. He had a good feel for the game, and a lot of the incompletion, not a lot, a couple of the incompletions were even drops by your receivers. I mean, he was on one.
Yes. He was on a heater. I mean, he played really well. I don't know how else to explain it. And it is a bit frustrating because that's what you were looking for out of him earlier in the year. And again, I don't want to take anything away from what Joe accomplished because he played really well. Vanderbilt's not very good, and they haven't stopped anybody all year long. So, I mean, you got to take that into account. But still, I mean, I don't think Austin Peay is very good in the secondary, and Joe couldn't hit some of those throws. And there were other moments and times where Joe couldn't hear that or couldn't complete those. And Michael Palmer wrote over here, the touchdown to Castles might have been his best throw at Tennessee. Probably was. I think you can make that case that it was. The touch pass to Castles at Alabama with a zero blitz backing up was a really nice ball for a guy who has struggled with touch. But the thing about the throw to Castles against Vanderbilt that stood out to me, Eric, was the timing of it and Castles was just really turning upfield when Joe let it go. And that's something he did not wait for somebody to be open. That is throwing to a spot. That's throwing a guy open, if you will. Those are the things everybody's been wanting to see out of Joe, and Joe put it all together yesterday.
He did. He was really good, and I couldn't agree more. I think, and I even said it in my Locked On Vols podcast, the pass to Castles right before the half at Alabama was really good. The throw to Castles yesterday, you tried to get a little rub route on it. Didn't necessarily work, but Castles just kind of, the out and up or the wheel, and he threw it to a position, and he went and made a great throw and just made an easy catch, and it was something to behold. We'll get to your questions. Again, we're going to take a lot of questions here tonight over the next hour. Donovan chimes in, says, hey, Nico should start the bowl game. I hope Joe opts out. That's going to be not necessarily just for Joe, which appears like he's going to play. He kind of said as much last night with his comment in the postgame press conference. But really over the next couple of weeks, what bowl game Tennessee's in, who's going to play, who's not going to play, transfer portal season. It's about to get wacky season, but it does look like Joe Milton is likely going to play for Tennessee, at least at this time in the bowl game.
Yeah, he is, and obviously based on what we saw yesterday, they're going to play him. They're going to play him a bunch, and so we'll see what we see out of Nico or what we don't see out of Nico, and what the approach may or may not be there. But based on Joe's comments leaving the media room in the interview yesterday, Eric, it's pretty clear to me that Joe's going to play in this football game, in the bowl game. I don't see any reason that he's going to opt out at this point. I do think there'll be some guys opt out, right? I think Tyler Barron kind of made it clear yesterday, leaving the field, that he was done. And we'll see. I mean, I think Jalen Wright opting out would make some sense because I think ultimately Jalen Wright's going to go pro. No. I don't know that he will for sure, but I think there'll be a couple of opt outs and then we'll see who's here. If somebody's in the portal and doesn't want to play, and if guys go in the portal, how does Josh Heupel handle that? Are they all going to be not allowed to go to the bowl game if you go in the portal here in the window? Those are always decisions that you have to make as a coach. So there's lots of things going on that you have to deal with. But I do think Joe's going to play to answer his question.
Mike Johnson says, saw Brent on ATP WHHH. I'm not sure what that is. I've seen more.
That's anything is possible. That's the Howard Hilton Hill TV show that he does.
Nice. That picture was incredible. Thanks for the interview. Enjoyed getting to know you better. That's really cool. I got to check that out. Love Anything Is Possible. And I did see that you were on it here recently, right? In the last month or so?
Part 1 ran last week, and I think part 2 is running this week. I'm not sure why they have any need for a 2-parter out of me, but I've known Hal for a long time, and obviously it was fun to sit down with him, and appreciate the invite, and just talking about kind of the journey to here and everything in life. So it was fun to do. I appreciate it, Mike.
Tournament Bracket says, hey, is there any reason to think Nico or any of the young secondary players will now get a shot in the bowl game? Man, it's been something weird to kind of see as the seasons progress, and really in years past too, when you have a blowout one way or the other, the reluctancy to play younger players, whether that's a backup quarterback or members of the secondary. Tennessee played Ricky Gibson a lot of snaps yesterday, but John Slaughter played one. Linebackers and defensive linemen have played a lot, but Ethan Davis, didn't get a whole lot of run. So
he didn't get on the field.
Yeah. So I guess to answer this question, I would say probably not. They're going to treat this like any other football game, and the way they go about their football game is to play their starters, play them a long time, and if there's an opportunity there at the end, maybe a series or two.
Yeah, I mean, listen, at safety, it's going to be Jalen McCullough, who's played 95% of the snaps, literally 95% of the snaps for Tim Banks since Tim Banks arrived, with Josh Heupel. I don't think Wesley Walker is going to be back for the bowl game with the knee that he's dealing with. So that means that you're going to see Andre Turrentine there. John Slaughter is not going to beat him out for that. They're not going to suddenly move a guy to a new position of safety. So I think you're going to see the safeties you've been seeing the last 2 weeks is who I think your safeties will be. And as for Nico, they clearly didn't have a plan to get him on the field early in that game yesterday. Now, maybe senior day, you feel a little different about it. I don't know. I don't think you should have. I think there were some things that did happen in that game for senior purposes. I think they played Hunter Salmon because he's a senior over Ethan Davis. They kicked a field goal with 30-something seconds left, in my opinion, to let Charles Campbell leave the field with a made kick in Neyland Stadium, not a miss. I still don't think you should have tried to kick it from 41 yards out when it's 4th and 3 with Nico on the field, but that's a different topic. So maybe they managed that a little bit different. I just have a hard time believing that they're going to go into a bowl game and say, hey, in the second quarter or the fourth series, we're going to put Nico in on the field. So I think it's going to be how it's been all season long. And if we see him, I think it'll be in the second half when a game's in hand or a game's out of hand.
Again, I mentioned silly season. It's about to start. Football season, regular season just ended, but we'll find out where Tennessee goes bowling and all that. Transfer portal is going to open up December the 4th. Trying to figure out finalize the class of 2024 recruiting, transfer portal, guys coming in, guys leaving, going to the portal from your current roster. So it's about to get wild. But I think also what's going to be important for Tennessee here in this next month before you play in a bowl game is to get some guys healthy. You mentioned some of these guys who are not going to play. Wesley Walker likely not going to play with his knee issue. Of course, Shamontes Bragdon's going to be out, and some of those other guys who are out for the year. But Jordan Thomas, who would have played a whole lot of football the last couple of weeks of the season, get him healthy. Some of these offensive tackles, potentially if they're still here on the roster, whenever the bowl game gets here, get them healthy and get an offensive line. Cooper Mays went down in series number 3 yesterday. Not a very healthy football team. Didn't matter yesterday because Vanderbilt's just not very good, and Tennessee took care of business. But you'd like to see this football team get a little healthy to have more players available for the bowl game.
Yeah, we'll see where they are on the offensive line. I don't know what John Campbell's got going on. I mean, is that he's banged up and really can't play, or with a month off, surely he's going to be healthy enough to play. But where is he kind of with all of it right now? We'll see where Cooper's at. You mentioned Spraggins. I don't think Gerald Mincey is going to get well for a bit. He may just labor through it, but you're going to give those guys some time off for sure and some rest during this bowl prep and this bowl season. I think bowl season preparations are a little bit over discussed. The whole idea that it's this big spring practice and it's 15 days. You got 7 of those are probably game prep type deal. 6 of them are game prep days. Now suddenly you're back down. You really got about 7 or 8 practices is what it boils down to, that are legit practices. So it's not really this spring practice everybody makes it out to be, in my opinion. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's not, wow, here's this great, off-season work to get everybody ready to go. And some guys can make this huge jump during bowl practice. I just don't think that is the reality of it. But then you look at Tamarion McDonald. Can you get him healthy and get him back with that shoulder? Jordan Thomas, as you mentioned. And listen, you talk about the safeties. If you get McDonald healthy and Jordan Thomas is back, maybe McDonald plays safety and Jordan Thomas plays star. Now, you might see that situation play out if Wesley Walker's not back. So that could be a possibility there at safety. Depending on where Tamarion McDonald is with his surgery or with his shoulder. The question is, does it need surgery? Do you go ahead and repair it so he can get back and get ready for spring practice? Those are all decisions and things that have to come about. I don't know exactly where that shoulder injury is right now.
And of course that, that combination, McDonald at safety, Jordan Thomas at star, that was something that I think Tennessee wanted to see here the last couple of weeks of the season, against Georgia, maybe against Vanderbilt, but McDonald went out there, did pregame warmups both games. Obviously, was deemed couldn't go, and then you're forced to kind of scramble and find a plan. Of course, Will Brooks started yesterday. Jordan Thomas started. I'm getting the game. I think Georgia game, played 2 snaps and got hurt, and Will Brooks played the rest of the game. So we will see how the health of this football team is as the team gets closer to the bowl game. And correct me if I'm wrong too. Obviously the whole month is crazy, but the schedule's kind of weird too. Like in years past, they'll work out and everything, but like they're not going to practice this week typically because the coaches will be out on the road, and then you'll come back and start that preparation. Is that right?
Yeah, they'll do some workout stuff, and there'll be a quote. There may be a quote practice, but it's not going to be anything of any real note. And then they've got to work around final exams and all of those types of things. So again, it's a bit helter skelter. It's not 4 consecutive days of 3.5-hour practices where a bunch of guys are going through everything. So I'm not saying it's pointless. It's not that, but It's not the spring practice because you're not going to line up and, put the ball down and have a bunch of, go 11 on 11 with a bunch of young guys and just scrimmage the thing out, because that's just not where you're at in this day and age.
Yeah, scout team will very much be present and accounted for during bowl practice, whereas in spring practice, there's no scout team. We'll answer more of your questions. We'll talk Tennessee, Vanderbilt. We'll talk Tennessee in the month of December, all that and more as the Rocky Top Rewind continues on. Do want to give a shout out to our friends. That is Spivey King and Spivey LLP, presenting sponsors of the Rocky Top Rewind. Good friends, gotten to know them, and really appreciate the partnership that they've had with Volquest.com during baseball season and now here with the Rocky Top Rewind. And they can help you guys. Hey, if you got a problem, let them find a solution for you. T and Trial Lawyers. They specialize in criminal defense, family law, and personal injury. They have 80 years of combined experience with this partnership being in place since 2012. And they're energized. They're ready for today's legal demands. They practice primarily in Northeast Tennessee, Tri-Cities of Sullivan County, as well as Hawkins County, Washington County, and surrounding areas. And whether you've been injured in a car accident, need a divorce, help with custody of your children, or you've been accused of a crime, Spivey King and Spivey LLP is here to help you. Give them a call today. That phone number is on the screen right now if you're watching, for a free consultation, 423-245-4185. 423-245-4185. You go see him in person at 142 Cherokee Street in Kingsport, Tennessee, and online at SpiveyKingandSpiveyLLP.com. Spivey King and Spivey LLP, proud presenting sponsors of the Rocky Top Rewind. Welcome back into the Rocky Top Rewind here on Sunday nights during football season. Volquest.com and on the Volquest YouTube channel. A big thanks to Spivey King and Spivey LLP for making it all possible, and you guys for being here. And let's get into some of those questions. We'll take it all until the top of the hour at 9 o'clock. Let's go to Lewis here. What current commits are instant impact guys? Which ones have a very high upside but need 1 to 2 years before contributing? It's always a tricky question because we'll have to kind of see what the staff thinks about them when they get on campus in spring and all that. But when I think instant impact, the closest one to me might be in special teams and Boo Carter. I think Boo Carter can help this team as a returner from the get-go, whereas it might take him a little while to see the field on defense. I think Boo Carter's the guy that can help immediately.
Yeah, and I think that, this has not been a smart aleck either, but I think it's hard to sit here and say, boy, I think there'll be 1 or 2 guys to make a big-time instant impact because of some positions on this field and their reluctance to play young players.
Yeah.
Maybe that changes moving forward. But, listen, they played Jeremiah Thielander a ton this year. Would you call him an instant impact guy? You know what I mean? Is that I don't know exactly what Lewis means by instant impact. Most of the time, I think instant impact is a guy who makes a big time name for himself, right? Yeah. And they really just haven't had one of those, particularly with the transfer portal. If you're looking for instant help, a lot of times you're going and getting that help out of the portal. That's not to say there's bad players or players in this class that can't help, but I think most of the contribution for these guys coming in right now are going to be special teams. And I think that's kind of where it sits.
I think, too, maybe I could define instant impact in terms of, being a body in a rotation. Like Arian Carter and Thielander both were kind of in that rotation from the get-go. Now, were they all SEC? No, they weren't, but they were a part of the rotation. And really, as the year went on, Thielander more because, of course, the injuries of that position. So I think it's all about how you kind of define it. Michael says, are the rumors true about Sampson entering the transfer portal or just rumors? Again, Brent, it is silly season. You're going to hear everything over the next couple of days, but a guy that Tennessee likes an awful lot, likely could be RB1 next year with Wright going to the NFL, as Dylan Sampson, a guy that Tennessee wants to hang on to.
Yeah, and Austin had an update with him about him on the general's quarters an hour and a half or so ago, and I think that he understands what his role would be on this team. I don't think he's against that role, but I'm sure there's schools reaching out to him, and it's the season for NIL deals, and as well as the silly season in terms of guys moving around. So I think Dylan Sampson's going to be back on this team. I think that he will be. He and Cam Seldon will be the two running backs next year, because I think Jalen Wright, and you don't have to find this question back there, I think somebody's asked this. I do think Jalen Wright's going to go pro. Where's he going to be drafted at? We'll see. Where's he going to be projected? We'll see. I think the run against Georgia was the most important run in his draft stock, because he ran away from a high-level defense, made a guy miss in the hole. He showed power, he showed speed, he showed the ability to miss. He kind of put it all on tape in that one snap, and I think that's going to resonate with some people. So I think he will ultimately go pro. And then I'm not sure where Jabari Small is going to be. He ran through the T as a part of Senior Day celebrations, and I'm not sure that Jabari Small, who does have a COVID year, I'm not sure that he's going to use that year to come back. I don't know that for sure, but it feels like it's probably going the other direction in terms of Jabari Small. So I think that means Dylan Sampson and Cam Seldon can be your top two backs. And I'm sure that'll be made known to Dylan Sampson. And I'm sure that Jerry Mack is having plenty of conversations with Dylan. I think it'll be fine, but there are certainly schools reaching out to a guy who, listen, he finished off the Kentucky game. He was great in the fourth quarter against Kentucky. He's not getting a ton of snaps. He didn't play in the first half of the game yesterday. Didn't get in the ballgame second half. So some people around him are saying, "Hey, what's the deal? You can't get on the field. You were the guy at the end of the Kentucky game. They all bragged about you, but your role hasn't grown at all. And hey, I hear this school be interested in you, or hey, I talked to so and so at this school and they'd love to have you, and all those things." That's the world we're living in right now. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and just like teams kind of, and Austin even said this in his update, teams, were coming after Jalen Wright last year.
Sure they were.
Kind of in a similar role, right? And we all thought that he was the best back on Tennessee's team last year, but was kind of in a backseat role. Tennessee made it know how much they value him and the plans for the future, and I expect that to be the same for Dylan Sampson as well. Herb says, what bowl games are on the table? Also, what do you think about opt-outs? Thanks for the show. Love it on Sunday nights. Bowl games. It looks like Tennessee to the Gator Bowl. I mean, obviously anything can happen. Obviously, it looks like the New Year's Six college football playoff will determine that. But right now, I would say Tennessee's best lined up to go to Jacksonville for the Gator Bowl.
Yeah, I think there's two things to watch next Sunday and watching the projections this week. One, how many teams in the SEC are projected in the New Year's Six and the college playoff combined? Okay, if it holds chalk, okay, and Georgia wins, okay, the favorites win, then Georgia's in the playoff. Alabama at 2 losses is not in the playoff. They are a New Year's Six team. And then Missouri should be a New Year's Six team. So you should get 3. Is there a chance they get 4 in the New Year, combined? Man, I have a hard time seeing it. I really do. So I think 3 are going to get in. Now, if Alabama beats Georgia, okay, maybe you got some chaos going on there, right? It also depends on what happens with some of these other teams around the country. I think both Washington and Oregon are going to be in the playoff / New Year's Six. Okay. I think Michigan and Ohio State are going to be in the playoff / New Year's Six. So then where does the rest of it fill out? Okay. And that's the debate. That's the question at this point. But let's say the SEC gets 3. Okay. And then from there, you're looking at Ole Miss probably to the Citrus Bowl, LSU to the old Outback Bowl, whatever it's called now. And I'm not trying to be mean, but it's been a couple of different things since then. So until I go there and can't get a blooming onion, I guess it'll be the Outback Bowl for me. And then that puts Tennessee likely in the Gator Bowl. So that's why all the vibe, and that's why you see all the projections of Tennessee to the Gator Bowls based on 3 SEC teams getting in the playoffs / New Year's Six.
And if you look at what Grant wrote last week on the site, and you kind of look at the projections, of the outlets, of the main outlets that are projecting bowl destinations, I think all but one had Tennessee in the Gator Bowl, and pretty much all of them had Tennessee against UNC, or Tennessee against NC State, most with the Tar Heels. If that matchup did happen for Tennessee and Carolina, which I think would be fun, Tennessee's going to play NC State here soon. Drake May, that'd be one to look out for. And then this is the case for, man, every team that's not in the college football playoff, high-level quarterback. Tennessee played a team that technically had a backup quarterback last year in Clemson, with DJ, getting out of town, and with Klubnik taking over. So Drake May, if he opted out of the bowl game, I think that that would help Tennessee's chances immensely, because coming into the year there was a whole lot of Caleb Williams and Drake May talk going top 5 in the NFL draft.
Yeah, and I don't know where May would be. I mean, you would think most of those guys don't play. You'd think Jaden Daniels not going to play for LSU, right? But then, Bryce Young played a year ago for Alabama, and what was a meaningless bowl game for them. Yeah, it was a New Year's Six bowl, but I mean, that was a meaningless bowl game for Alabama, and he went ahead and played in that game. So you never know. I mean, the May family is obviously, North Carolina to the core. I would think he would probably opt out, and work on his draft stock, but that doesn't mean that he will. I don't know where he's at. That team is kind of going. I don't know where they're going at North Carolina. They got handled pretty good last night. He's taken a pretty good beating down the stretch of the season here, so I don't know that he would want to get hit again, but we'll see. North Carolina's in an interesting place, and I'll be curious to see exactly what the ACC pecking order looks like. I mean, how attractive is North Carolina as a bowl team right now? Because they have faded hard down the stretch of this season.
Yep, they have. And again, that's something to track over the next week, and we'll find out all those destinations this time next week. Eddie says, all right, what's the outlook for 2024? Don't we lose a lot of experience? Isn't the schedule more difficult? To be determined, right? And again, we say this all the time. We've been answering that in the mailbag over the last couple of weeks, but it truly is until we see what some of these guys decide to do. Cooper Mays, what's he going to do? Javonte Spraggins, John Campbell, Gerald Mincey, Amari Thomas, Bryson Eason, Omar Norman-Lott. I mean, a lot of these interior guys at the line of scrimmage. What about Brew McCoy? A lot of these guys that have, availabilities to come back, or they could go, whether it be to the NFL or to move on in life. Also, what does Tennessee get in the transfer portal? Who does Tennessee lose? Again, a lot's going to happen, and this is why college coaches should be paid even more. A lot is going to happen over the next 3 weeks. So much is going to happen. I just don't feel like we're going to have a feel for who this team is right now until that happens. He also mentions the schedule. We don't know the dates permanently just yet, but the opponents are out there for the SEC. No divisions, we know that. So, it's to be determined, but what we do know is you're going to have Nico as your quarterback. You should feel good about your run game, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Well, yeah, and the schedule's kind of about what you thought it was going to be in a lot of ways, because Oklahoma was on the schedule as a non-conference opponent. Mississippi State was already scheduled to be played there. So it was kind of the schedule you were going to play for the most part. So I don't know that it's dramatically more difficult than what it was scheduled to be. Is it more difficult than it was this year? Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, you're going to trade Oklahoma for Virginia if you went that direction, right? So, yeah. I mean, I think it's more difficult than this year's schedule is, but it's kind of the schedule you were preparing to play for anyway. I mean, and the question is going to be, how much of the experience do you lose, and how much development do you have? Right. So if you don't get all those offensive linemen back, where are those backup guys that we haven't seen play?
Yeah.
I mean, we saw Addison Nichols play yesterday for the first time. Where's Addison Nichols at moving forward? But we don't have any idea about Bison Lang, Messiah Reddick, Mo Clipper, Brian Grant, these guys that have been on this team and been in this program for a couple of years that have yet to play a snap of note. So we'll see. I mean, this spring is going to be pretty fascinating. They could be a veteran team in the line of scrimmage, or they could be a really inexperienced team in the line of scrimmage, depending on what looks like. Because this is a team that doesn't have a ton of juniors, right? They've got a bunch of redshirt freshmen. They got a bunch of freshmen, and they've got a bunch of seniors who are leaving the program. So they're going to be a young football team next year, unless out of your 20 COVID year guys, if you get half of them or a little more, let's say you get 8 to 12 of them back, you're suddenly a much more experienced football team in critical areas such as the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, you said you're either going to be young or veteran-led in the line of scrimmage, and you certainly hope it's the latter when you're breaking in a new quarterback at an investment like Nico, for sure. Other guys I didn't even mention that could come back. We'll see about Keenan Peely. We'll see about Tamarian McDonald. I mean, there's so many of those different guys. And that kind of leads me into this next question here from Daniel. Of all the seniors who have the option of returning, who would you rate as a must-keep players for next year? Brent, I think the conversation, and again, there's a lot that you welcome back with open arms. I think the conversation starts with Cooper Mays. It's Cooper Mays want to come back because outside of the quarterback, each of the past 2 seasons, maybe the most important player on that offense for what the offense wants to do is your center. And Cooper Mays is a good center in this offense. So I would start with Cooper Mays and then work out to some of those other guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Mays. Again, I think the most important asset in your football program heading into 24 is Nico. So what can you do to protect and help Nico? What's the most important thing for Nico? You say, well, the offensive line, but specifically you're talking about Cooper Mays, helping him identify things up there, helping him get things lined up, play the tempo that you want to play. All those types of things, I think, make sense that it's Cooper Mays. Because if it's not Cooper Mays, it's going to be Vyson Lang, who has, 6 snaps under his belt in his career at Tennessee right now. So because I don't know that you bring a transfer in at center and he picks this offense up and plays. So we'll see. I mean, I think it's Cooper Mays. And then on the other side of the ball, I mean, you're talking about 4 defensive tackles. I mean, 22-year-old defensive tackles versus 19-year-old defensive tackles. That is a big, big difference in college football. And so which of those guys can you get back? Who do you get back along that defensive interior? Now, I like Hobbs. I think Hobbs is going to take a big step this offseason, right? Weathersby, everybody's really excited about, but we haven't seen him play. Nathan Robinson, if he can stay healthy, we'll see where he's at, but he hasn't played. But you got guys like Elijah Simmons, Amari Thomas. You've got Bryson Eason. You've got Omar Norman. These are guys who have lined up and played in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Gainesville, Florida, at home against quality opponents. And they have not just held their own, they've made plays. So that's a big deal. That can change the outlook of your defense dramatically if you get some of those guys back in the interior.
Yeah, it's worth noting, too, I think Tyree Weathersby was going to be a factor at some point this year in that rotation. They play so many guys. Caleb Herring has gotten some snaps throughout the year, more so here lately because of the injury to Roman Harrison. But again, those guys you mentioned have been there, done that, have made some plays. And, you much rather, again, have 22-year-olds than 18-year-olds playing. So a lot's going to happen. We'll track it all at Volquest.com. We'll continue to take your questions here in just a moment here on the Rocky Top Rewind. I do want to tell you about our friends. That is Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry about buying your tickets to the next big event, whether that's a sporting event at Neyland Stadium for next year, Thompson Bowling Arena, Food City Center for this basketball season, Lindsey Nelson Stadium for this upcoming baseball season. Maybe it's to a concert. Maybe it's to a theater. Maybe it's to some other event in your area here in Knoxville or wherever you guys live. You can buy those tickets and more with super ease and get discounts over at Game Time. Game Time is a fast, easy way to buy all those tickets. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, so you know exactly what you're paying for before you actually purchase. They've got the best price guaranteed. That means if you find cheaper tickets in the same section, they're going to credit you 110% of that seat value. They have got your back, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all that and more. And today, if you download that Game Time app and you put in the promo code VOLS, VOLS, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, go ahead and create that account. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the promo code VOLS, VOLS, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. More of your questions coming up next right here on the Rocky Top Rewind presented by Spivey King and Spivey, LLP. Welcome back into the Rocky Top Rewind every Sunday night during football season here at Volquest.com and Volquest on the YouTube channel. We'll get back into your questions. Again, continue to send those in there. We will get to them as we work through this until 9 o'clock. Let's go to Kevin here. Kevin says, how many recruiting classes is it going to take to get to the level of Alabama's, Georgia's, and other top tiers? You know, Brent, going into the Georgia week when I was doing the first glance and all of our shows leading up to it, I kept saying that, you know, gone were the star names, like the name power, if you will. You still had Brock Bowers, great player, but you know, all those first rounders that are playing for the Eagles right now, they're not already there yet. Georgia's still the best team in the country, in my opinion, and that just goes back to player development, but you know, recruiting year after year, stacking that on top of one another, and it takes a little while. How long is it going to take to get to the Georgia, to the level of Alabama, if you're a Tennessee?
Well, and I think that you have a couple other factors to throw in there with that. I mean, one of the things Georgia's had is they've had minimal attrition when you look at it. I mean, how many defensive guys have left Georgia's program? Not many. They've kept their depth there. They lost a couple offensive guys, but they replaced those. Not a big deal there. So Georgia built this depth of roster pre-one-time transfer, pre-NIL. That's where a lot of this stuff came about, and a lot of these guys got on the roster, so to speak. So we'll see how that continues moving forward. I mean, I think it starts to catch them, quote, catch them, to line up and compete with them. I think it starts with quarterback play. You got to have great quarterback play. I mean, you look at, Tennessee's moved the ball against Alabama in 3 games for really as well as anybody, minus the second half this year. Okay, but Hendon Hooker, one-armed and short-handed, moved the ball up and down the field against Alabama 2 years ago down there. And, of course, they beat them a year ago. So I think quarterback play, you have to have that. You have to have high-level quarterback play to catch to beat those guys. Now, in terms of getting there and catching them and sustaining and being up there, I don't know. I mean, that does take time. I mean, you've got to keep everybody you've got. You've got to develop. You've got to have guys stay healthy. You've got to have guys stay and play even when they're not playing prominent roles. They've got to be willing to stick with it and play it out. There's a lot of variables involved there that probably makes it a little harder right now than it has been. Now, the question is, can Georgia continue to sustain at the way that they're sustaining right now? I mean, right now, nobody's doing what Georgia's doing. I mean, even Saban didn't do what Georgia's doing right now in his heyday. So we'll see. Georgia's the team everybody is chasing, not just in the SEC, but around the country. And I think a lot of people still have a long race to go to catch them.
You mentioned it starts with quarterback, and I completely agree. Michael says, could there be a Nico effect with offensive players transferring in to play with him now that it looks like this is his team for 2024? Didn't really have much coattails in recruiting, and that's what I was going to say. We thought there would be more of a quote-unquote Nico effect. If you remember in that recruiting class, you got Nico on the offensive side of the football, which was great. He was the #1 overall player in the cycle. But Tennessee had a lot of star power on the defensive side of the football in that class. Doesn't mean they didn't have good offensive players, but it didn't have the greatest effect, I guess, that a lot of people thought, might come in here. Could you see guys wanting to come in here via the transfer portal to play with Nico? I would say it's a little difficult right now because, again, Nico hadn't played an awful lot, but more or less this offense is just attracting to offensive talent, to wide receivers, to quarterbacks who want to go make plays. I think that's a bigger deal than Nico right now. Now, after next year, potentially, once you see him get out there and hopefully ball out, but I think this offense is just attractive for wide receivers.
Yeah, I think it's hard to sit here and say, hey, there's a guy going to go in the portal because he wants to go to Tennessee to play with Nico, who's played in 4 games in the second half of some blowout games and hasn't played what I would deem a meaningful snap yet in his Tennessee career. So I don't know that anybody's lining up for that because it's going to be his team in 24. But, we'll see. I mean, you're right. The offense is attractive, but I don't know that guys in the transfer portal are going to say, hey, I want to go play for this guy based on, the scramble and a couple throws he made against Connecticut and Vanderbilt late and, Virginia early in the year. I mean, there's just not enough out there for you to go, wow. And listen, I think he's an immense talent, and I think he's going to be a good player. I just don't think anybody in the country has paid attention to him this year because he hadn't played enough.
This is a good question here from Donovan. Hub, you get one quarterback to lead a game-winning drive. Who you picking since you've covered the team? I would assume this is one Tennessee quarterback of old. Who's your quarterback? Game-winning drive down by 5 in the fourth quarter. Who you picking to lead your team to that game-winning drive?
Well, I mean, it's hard not to pick a Hall of Famer, right? And Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
Now Peyton Manning college version versus NFL version is a little bit different. I would agree with that, but I would say Peyton Manning. The guy who is the coolest and never bothered by anything that I would have a hard time betting against is Casey Clausen. Now, I'm not saying he's better than Peyton Manning, which is why you got to throw the Peyton Manning thing out there first, right? But in terms of just having to go get something done as a college player, as a young college player, that guy was absolutely ice water in his veins and completely fearless. He really was. And I'll tell you who else was pretty good in those situations. Randy Sanders was a pretty doggone good play caller in those situations. Not a knock on David Cutcliffe, but in those situations, Randy Sanders was really good. That combination of Clausen and Sanders, they went and won some games they probably shouldn't have been in that situation, but they found a way to win them. Those two guys were really dynamic and really good together. So it'd be hard to go against them, but it's also hard to say, hey, I'm not going to take the guy who's in Canton, Ohio right now. Just because the image you have of Peyton Manning is, he led a gazillion comebacks for the Colts and the Broncos in his NFL career.
Yeah, and then, if you're talking about this specific offense, it's hard not to say the guy that played it to the best of his ability and should have been in New York as a Heisman finalist in Hendon Hooker. You got a lot of different, and then you got a guy balling out in the NFL right now, and Josh Dobbs. You got a lot of quarterbacks to choose from.
Yep.
Let's go to tournament bracket here. Between Nico and G-Mac, that's George McIntyre, which one is higher thought of in NFL circles? I think that's all still premature. Higher thought of in terms of prospects for the college game. Nico was the number 1 overall player in the country. But G-Mac is really, really highly thought of. Tennessee wants him. Tennessee wants him to be the quarterback in the class of 25.
Yeah, I don't think the NFL's got him on the radar right now. So I don't know that anybody's thought of higher than the other in NFL circles. The NFL wants to see you do it against some competition on Saturdays. How you're going to play, how you're going to handle yourself there. That's where it's way too premature for anybody for the NFL circles to have a real thought. Even though some guys have been at practice, I don't think anybody's coming out of practice going, this guy's this or this guy's that. And the NFL people haven't seen George McIntyre unless a Titans assistant coach's kid plays in a private school game with George or against George in Nashville.
Which could be likely.
Possibility.
Let's stay with tournament bracket here. Would Merklinger likely redshirt if Nico is doing his thing? That's an interesting question. I think it depends on, and again, there's some parallels to Nico this year. Is Jake Merklinger the backup from day one? If he's the backup quarterback, then he's going to go in and play if needed. Nico never had to go in for a helmet popping off, or I thought of that a moment ago when you said he hasn't played a meaningless snap. Because Joe was durable this year for the most part, but he was the backup quarterback. Now, towards the end of the season, where it made sense just to redshirt him, whatever, but the plan was not to redshirt Nico. So for Merklinger, if he's the backup quarterback next year, I would assume the plan would not to be to redshirt him at all, but if the cards fall where they are at the end of the season, then maybe he gets that redshirt.
Yeah, I think the plan would be to try to play him. You would play him 4. I don't think you go in with the idea of, hey, we're definitely redshirting him or not. Is Gaston Moore back? What happens there? Could he come back and be your backup quarterback? You're going to need a third quarterback on this roster. Is that a transfer out there who becomes your backup? I don't know. And I've got no idea what Jake Merklinger's adjustment period is going to be to college football, right? I don't know how quick he would be ready to play or not ready to play. So I would imagine he would play some if given the opportunity next year. But I don't know that you have a plan that says, hey, we're definitely not redshirting him or we're definitely going to redshirt him. You just kind of play that out as you go. I don't think a lot of people go into a plan at certain positions and say, hey, we're definitely going to redshirt this guy or we're not going to redshirt. I think you get to where you are in October and then you start thinking about those decisions.
Point of emphasis will be attacking the transfer portal for the University of Tennessee. Again, depending on who does what in terms of COVID seniors, will play a hand in this. But, Tennessee attacking the transfer portal, positions of need. Herb wants to know. Brandon starts with tight end. You have got to get a tight end out of the transfer portal. I would assume offensive line. Like to get a receiver. And then, of course, Rodney's never going to turn down an experienced defensive line to kind of add to that arsenal. But I think those are the positions you could start with. And, of course, there's a best available that makes sense, maybe a linebacker. But tight end, offensive line, receivers, kind of where I would start. Is that right for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely looking at tight end first, and then offensive tackle is to me where you got to go next. And then what do you have on that defensive line? Who's coming back? Who's not coming back? Will dictate that. At the linebacker position, does Peely come back? Does he not come back? If Peely comes back, you're not taking a linebacker. In the secondary, you're going to have some attrition back there before you think about doing anything back in the back end, because you have a lot of bodies back there. Running back, probably not. I mean, with where you are and what you have, I don't know who would jump in there. I don't see that. Potentially wide receiver, depending on what Brew McCoy is going to do. And is everybody who's currently on the roster back, and none of those guys go in the portal moving forward.
Ben jumps in and says, he's talking about Nico here. I've been really disappointed in how the media's made the entire season about a player who was always going to be the backup this year that put a cloud over the entire season. Hey, that was, in my opinion, that was going to happen regardless. I mean, Joe was going to be the starter. Joe was going to be the starter until he either injury or he gave a reason not to be the starter. And throughout the year, he didn't give enough reasons to not be the starter. He gave Tennessee the best chance to win. But you were a 5-star quarterback. Mr. NIL man, number one player in the country. There was always going to be that talk, no matter what. And there's always that talk about the backup quarterback. I just think it magnifies with everything that Nico kind of brought in. So, it just is what it is. You, we all want to see Nico in blowout games. I think that just kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah, I mean, look, if Texas had not had a good year, right? If Ewers had not played well, had he gone to Alabama and not played well, and they lost that game, what would the narrative, what would the story in Austin, Texas have been all year?
Arch.
It would have been about Arch Manning. The story of Nico evolved and really took on a new life because you didn't win at Florida. And then even in a win against Texas A&M, you threw for 100 yards and you completed 50% of your throws. And so everybody likes the backup quarterback anyway. And Joe did not make this offense hum the way everybody expected it to hum. Okay. Nobody thought they would lead the country in scoring this year, but nobody also thought that this would be Josh Heupel's lowest performing, stats wise, lowest performing offense of his coaching career. And so when you have all those things, the answer is quarterback, right? And that's a discussion, and everybody's going to discuss the backup quarterback. You knew that going in, okay? And that was always going to be the case. So I don't think it's a media-created narrative. I don't think the media's driven anything home. I think fans – and listen, it was not the warmest night last night inside that stadium. Now, it wasn't a bad night for November, don't get me wrong, but it was chilly. There were a whole bunch of fans still in that stands for the second half. And they weren't there for their send-off for the 35 seniors who were leaving. They were there because they wanted to see the quarterback play.
No.
That's what they stayed for. Now, is that the media's creation? No, that's what fans wanted to see. And so that's where that is. I don't think it put a cloud over this season. I think the cloud over the season was you didn't win a game at Florida. You blew a 2-score lead at the half at Alabama, and you no-showed against Missouri. That's a much bigger cloud than the fact that Nico's on the roster.
And I also think there's a difference in, sure, the potential was fun. Everybody, it feels like in the national, areas we're kind of just saying, Joe Milton, he's my guy because he can throw it 90 yards and all that and everything. But there's a difference in Quinn Ewers, who has been there, done that, and who is a good quarterback. And then Joe Milton, who really hadn't proven anything, right, in terms of Nico and then Arch. It was... Quinn Ewers is a really good quarterback. Arch should have never touched the field this year, right? And I think it's a little bit different where there's some more unexpected heading into the year with Joe Milton to where you could see Nico.
Well, and I think the other thing, too, is there was also a point with Joe Milton where a lot of people probably put too much stock in Joe based on the Clemson game. And look, he made a couple of really good throws in the Clemson game. He really did, but they also had 6 3-and-outs in the Clemson game.
No,
he didn't. It wasn't like they were just up and down the field boat racing, Clemson all day long offensively. So I think that narrative in the media probably propelled Joe into a situation where he was a little more highly regarded by some people created a real expectation for someone who had, quite frankly, not lived up to much of his expectations throughout his college career. So all of that plays into those factors. I mean, that's just part of it. And Joe was their guy. He was going to be their guy from start to begin, from beginning to end, unless he got hurt or unless he just was absolutely terrible. And there just wasn't that other than the A&M game, which they won. That was his worst game. He played a really good first half against Alabama. Joe did. He played really well.
Yeah.
He played really well at Kentucky. Nobody played well at Missouri. And Georgia's Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bottom line. And then in the Florida game, you gave up 28 straight.
Let's go here to Jeff. Jeff says, how many would you expect to leave Tennessee to the portal? 0 to 10, 10 to 20? Brent, I would assume, man, if I'm picking one of the two, probably 0 to 10, though I do think last year you got close to that 10 number, if not right on it. Players looking for different opportunities, maybe we're clouded on the depth chart, all that type of stuff. You're going to get a lot of those type of guys, but if I'm picking between the two there, I would say 0 to 10, but I think it'll be closer to the 10 number just because it was last year.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be some guys who leave the program that, and this is no offense to those, that fans probably didn't realize they were even a part of the program, right? That just, he was still on the team, or, I forgot that he signed. That they were just a non-factor, and there'll be some guys like that will leave. I don't think it's going to be near 20. If I were guessing, it's probably somewhere between 6 and 10, 6 and 12, somewhere in that range, Eric, would be kind of where my thought on it would be. But hey, man, we're living in a world where, I mean, that there's rumors out about Dylan Sampson, who is going to ascend to the number one spot in the running back position at Tennessee. And I think he's going to be back, but that rumor is going to be out there for a while until Dylan Sampson, puts the record straight or sets the record straight on it. So what did we have last year? 5, 6 stories written in admin ready to go about guys who were transferring because the rumor was pretty heavy that they were leaving the program and they ended up not going anywhere.
Yeah.
That's just welcome to the silly season that you're dealing with right now. And, there's going to be some guys out there that flirt with it that fans never hear about. And then there'll be somebody who leaves that probably surprises everybody that you don't anticipate leaving. I don't know who that will be, but my guess is there'll be somebody where you went, that guy's really going to leave? I mean, think of the opportunities he's going to have here, but he's going to leave anyway. That's probably going to happen because that's the world we're in right now.
And it wasn't even 24 hours from the end of the game yesterday to where the rumor mill is already going. I mean, it's just nature of the beast, right?
Look how many people unofficially went into the portal today, because the portal doesn't open for another week. But how many people around the country went in the portal today? There's a graphic out on social media, player X is going in the portal when it's a week away from that happening, but it's already out there because those guys are trying to get it out there so they can start the recruiting process, so they can start to get people's interest in them and they can figure out what are my options going to be. Now, they may pull their name back out if they don't like those options, but they're getting it out there to kind of create and see what kind of buzz there is about themselves, to see what options they have available, or to try to leverage their current team into a better situation.
And that's something to remember too, Brent, you would know more than I do, but to my memory, only 2 players, since the transfer portal has been a thing, only 2 players at Tennessee have entered and come back. Now, the coaching staff, when you enter, they can say, nope, there's not a spot for you anymore, or if you want to keep a spot, they can come back. But only 2 players. That was Karat Garland way back when Jeremy Pruitt was here like a couple years ago, and Tyler Barron a couple years ago as well. Normally when you enter the portal, you're gone, but you still do have that option if they want to hold a spot for you. But a lot of times you're meeting with the coaching staff, you're meeting with your position coach. If you go in the portal, it's pretty much a done deal.
Yeah, and sometimes you're encouraged to go into the portal.
Yeah.
This is not all just a one-way street, right? I mean, this is roster management. I mean, if the player wants to leave, I mean, it's kind of like going and asking your boss for a raise. I got some really good advice from somebody a long time ago. Don't go ask your boss for a raise unless you got another job lined up. Don't go threatening in to leave because you may get your bluff called on it if you're just trying to get a raise out of it. we're not seeing that in college football, but because coaches actually don't know the word no. They don't ever hear the word no. They're never told no. Hey, we need this. Okay. Hey, we need to buy this piece of equipment. Hey, we want to travel this way. Hey, we want to do this. Most of the time they get what they want. Okay. So at this point, nobody's really called anybody's bluff. But we're going to see a point in time where some guys are going to kind of go in and do that. And they're going to go, okay, good luck. See ya. And the guy might not really want to leave,
Yeah.
but he thought he was swinging a bigger stick, if you will, than what he was, and he might get called on it. So we'll have to see. The other thing that's going on out there, and I saw this one scrolling by about NC State potentially getting raided with defensive players. Hey, this is the first time, Eric, we have really started to see coaches around the country. I don't want to say beg's too strong of a word, but has openly asked, pleaded, maybe is a better word than beg, pleaded for money because their program doesn't have the resources and the funds and NIL to keep some players on the roster that they want to keep. Okay, Dave Doran's done that. We've heard Mark Stoops do that this year.
Lane Kiffin.
Lane Kiffin's done that. You're starting to see some coaches do that because they're feeling the heat, right? Pressure to win. They get a guy, and then they can't keep the guy. Look at Dave Clawson. I thought Dave Clawson's comments last week were funny, but they were pretty appropriate in that from the standpoint of, just take out the Notre Dame celebrating him, but just, here's a guy that they go and they get Sam Hartman. Nobody else wanted him. They develop him. They turn him into a really good player. Okay. It's like you get him to AAA level in baseball and then they call him up. Right in the middle of your pennant race, they call him up to the big show. And that's essentially what happened with Sam Hartman. He got called up to a better program and took money for it. Can't blame Sam Hartman for doing that. But those things are killing coaches right now and mentally, and are putting a ton of stress and burden. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of coaches ask openly for money for the first time.
We'll get to a couple more here. Got a couple of minutes left on the show. Austin A brings up a good name, and this is one that, I'm not saying he's going to enter the portal or anything, but this was a highly touted prospect, highly rated, came in. Everybody's excited about it, but didn't play a factor at all with a lot of injuries at his position. That's Nathan Laycock. Huge offseason for Nathan Laycock, but obviously, too, in the era that we're in, transfer portal, that's a name that's going to be thrown around a lot, saying, well, could he leave? What's the deal with him?
Well, I don't know that he's got any tape to leave. I'm not sure why anybody would be asking. Somebody asked earlier, is there a chance Nico could strong arm you? Who's going to give Nico a deal like he's got right now at Tennessee, right? So some of it is you got to know your leverage points and where you are. I don't think Nathan Laycock's got any real leverage at this point. He needs to put his head down and go to work and become a better football player. Now, the word is he's had a better, close to the season than he did at the early part of the season. It looked like to me he was what's the old saying by the coach? Don't let your mind tie up your feet. When we saw him in fall camp, I thought his feet were getting tied up by him mentally. He was thinking too much about what he was having to do route wise, as opposed to just playing instinctively. He's got to get to the point where he's playing instinctively in this offense on the practice field to give himself a chance to go play.
Odds Brew McCoy or Keenan Peely come back. Also, Haddon is gone, right? Yes, Haddon is. He's already said his goodbyes. Pretty sure he's out of eligibility anyway with the season-ending injury. Brew McCoy, of course, that's one to monitor. He had a note in the war room a couple weeks ago, and of course you saw him, in pictures. He's already walking in a boot. Keenan Peely's been out since the Virginia game. Tennessee would love to have both those guys back, but we'll have to see. And of course, Kamal Haddon is gone, and it's a shame too, man, because his story was unique, but also he was playing so good when he got injured.
Yeah, and Kamal doesn't have a chance. He never had a chance to have the extra year of eligibility. This was his last year. Mm-hmm. Between Brew and Peely, if I were laying odds, I would probably lay odds on Peely returning more than Brew, but I don't know. I don't know that either one of them return. Brew's further along in the rehab process than I thought he would be. So what does that look like 3 or 4 weeks from now? How far along is he in the rehab? Does he feel like he's going to be able to get to a point where he can really account for himself? Does he want to come back and play with Nico? I think those are all things that looking at NIL, all those things are a factor in there with Brew McCoy. Peely, does he, what kind of tape would he have for the NFL? I mean, he hasn't played in 2 years. The challenge with Peely is he's married in 26. We're going to be 26. So how much more college football does he really want to play? But if he's trying to get to the NFL, it feels like Peely has to come back to get some things on tape. Brew doesn't necessarily have to if he can get healthy, because I think he's got more on tape than Peely does recently. Peely was very productive at BYU early in his career, but he's not done anything for 2 years. So there's a lot of unknown about Peely, whereas Brew was playing well before the injury.
Squirrel White's done a lot of good things this year. I am a huge fan. I love watching Squirrel White play. There is a difference in Brew McCoy out there blocking for that screen than Squirrel White lead blocking for sure. And that's something that I think, more than the receptions or anything, I think that's something that Tennessee missed so much, was just the physicality at that position. Two guys that Tennessee would welcome back with open arms, that is for sure. I hate that football season's over. I know we got bowl game coming up and all that. I hate the regular season's over. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be wild. It's going to be taxing. It's going to be a fun month of December to cover, because it's a lot of moving parts. And, of course, no better place to follow everything Tennessee football related than right here at Volquest.com. Brent, we got so much going on right now. Basketball season, recruiting as well. And, of course, that stocking stuffer is as crisp as nears. A Volquest.com subscription might be that perfect thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because the regular season's over, I mean, this is the crazy time where all kinds of stuff's happening, not just recruiting, but obviously with the transfer portal stuff and all those things that are going to be out there. There's going to be one rumor after the other out there, as well as 20 guys making a decision on whether they want to come back and play another year of college football. So it is a busy month with a lot going on, and we're going to do everything we can to break it all down and to give you all the latest information we have just as soon as we have it and can confirm it all. And it should be a lot of fun, and should be a busy, crazy month with a lot of rumors for us to sort through, but plenty of discussion about it on the General's Quarters.
He is Brent Hubbs. I'm Eric Kane. A big shout out to Spivey, King and Spivey LLP, for making this coverage possible. If you have a need, let them help you. They specialize in criminal defense, like personal injury, alimony, everything like that. Go check out Spivey, King and Spivey LLP.com today. Free consultation. The phone number 423-245-4185. Thank you guys so much for submitting your questions, for watching along, listening to us here tonight on the Rocky Top Rewind.